Welcome back to Transform Your Workplace, the podcast that helps leaders, HR pros, and business owners create better workplaces where people can truly thrive. I'm your host, Brandon Laws, and every week on this podcast, we dig into the practices and ideas that help you inspire your people, build trust, and unlock performance. This show is sponsored by Xenium HR, and at Xenium, we believe people are the greatest asset of any business, and that's why our learning and development programs are built to empower leaders and employees alike. From hands-on workshops to coaching programs, our L&D team equips organizations with the tools to build stronger managers, improve communication, and strengthen culture. Because when your people grow, your business grows. Learn more at xeniumhr.com. Now, for today's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Mita Mallick, author of the new book, The Devil Emails at Midnight: What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. This conversation is one of those hold a mirror up moments. Mita and I talk about how even good people can slip into bad boss behaviors, often because of stress, personal crises, or simply being thrown into management without the right training. She opens up about her own experiences as a micromanager, the impact grief had on her leadership, and the ways bosses, intentionally or not, shape their employees' mental health more than anyone else. You'll hear practical takeaways you can apply right away, like how to rethink one-on-ones as a retention tool, why canceling unnecessary meetings can actually build trust, how showing what done looks like helps you avoid micromanagement, and why inclusion often starts with something as simple as saying someone's name correctly. This is a powerful conversation that's both vulnerable and tactical. If you've ever had a bad boss or worried about being one yourself, you'll walk away with insights that will help you lead with more clarity, empathy, and impact. All right, let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Mita Mallick. Mita, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, by the time this podcast releases, your new book is out, The Devil Emails at Midnight: What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. And, you make the point that bad bosses are not born. They're made by their circumstances. And curious what some of the most common circumstances that might push otherwise good people into becoming bad bosses.
So if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, I wouldn't be sitting here with as much empathy as I do for bad bosses, because I've been a bad boss and chances are so have you. And I've watched and studied and researched and experienced typically 3 moments where there's bad boss behavior that comes out. And it's, stress induced, of course. So the first will be something's happening in the marketplace that it's affecting your company, your team. Sitting in the US right now, tariffs are still a big part of the conversation. You have a competitor who launches an innovation that did gangbusters. You had no idea, came from out of nowhere. You have a merger and acquisition that has failed, but no one wants to talk about it. They're burying it. So that creates bad boss behavior. Number 2, I have young children. We talk about poo-poo in our house trickles down. So bad boss behavior trickles down. So you work for me. You're a new leader. You're working for me and I have bad boss tendencies and you don't know any better, so you start to absorb them. Or maybe I'm under stress, so that's stressing you out. And then number 3, an earthquake has happened in your personal life. Something so cataclysmic: grief, loss, miscarriage, someone's ill, you're ill, breakup, divorce, you've moved towns, you've moved countries. I can go on and on. But I have found from personal experience, when you try to bury grief or emotion or try to compartmentalize and you think that's going to stay at home, it shows up at work in moments where you least expect it. And when you're trying to deal with this emotion, who's the easiest target to unleash it on?
Your employees. Yeah.
They're right there. Right there. Here we are. Yes.
Clearly, you've done a lot of self-reflection. I mean, the opening line of your book says, I was a bad boss. And I'm curious, just you've done self-reflection. What caused you to become a bad boss?
Many moments. So it's really interesting. It's a spectrum, isn't it? You can be a bad boss and then a good leader, and a bad boss and a good leader. It goes back, and sometimes we're even great. And so it's not that it's in one moment in time I've been a bad boss forever. But what's been interesting is as I've watched companies grow and help them scale and also have been on my own leadership journey is that the moment you go from individual director, individual contributor to leading teams, wow, ripe for bad boss behavior. And for me, if you worked for me years ago, I'm sorry, I was likely micromanaging Mita, if you nicknamed me. I was a notorious micromanager because guess what? I got this big promotion. I was leading people, but no one ever told me I'm not supposed to do your job. I'm supposed to teach you how to do your job. We don't have that discussion, right? You have this great expertise, and then all of a sudden you get the title, the office, the money, and then, hey, you're in charge of all these people. I'm like, I didn't ask for this. I don't even know what to do with this. And so that for me has been one of the moments. And then I talk about, there's 13 bosses in the devil emails at midnight. I'm one of them. And it ends with me when I lost my dad suddenly in 2017. And I talk about the role grief plays in our lives, how we don't talk enough about it, the case for companies to have more space for bereavement leave, but also that when you don't deal with grief, it shows up in unexpected ways.
You said that bosses have more of an impact on someone's mental health than their own partner or family might. I mean, that's a pretty staggering statement. In what ways do you believe managers have enormous power over our organizations and people?
So there's a recent study that I wasn't able to include in the book because the book is coming out imminently. It showed 2/3 of people say that their boss has an impact on their mental health versus their spouse, partner, best friend, children. You're like, wow, It's the power dynamic. It's always going to exist. If you work for me, as much as I try to be a leader who's in service of others, depending on the company, my title, my position, where I sit on the org chart, there's power. And so how do I use that for good or evil? I sound like a Marvel movie, but what do I doing with that power? And so if I am creating an environment where you're constantly under stress, you're constantly feel like you're being watched, you ultimately feel like you can't do your best work, that's impacting your mental health. I mentioned that I cover 13 bosses. I'm one of them. Out of the 12 remaining, probably 3 of them really had a significant impact on my mental health. Absolutely significant.
One of the bosses, and I'm sure this is true of many of them, they just never made time for you. And if time is the most precious thing we have, what does it say to employees when their boss never has time for them? And how do you think that lack of presence in the employee's work life erodes trust and loyalty in a way that bosses might not even realize?
Yes. When you don't have time for me, you signal that you don't care about me. I don't matter. You don't care if I work here. And so the devil emails at midnight. That's the opening chapter. The boss who never had time for me. Literally, I remember chasing her around the office like a golden retriever. I just wanted time with her. And I chased her out into the parking lot. I really did. And she drove off. But it was like I was not important enough for her, except between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. when she dumped her inbox onto mine. And so my question is, why are you leading teams if you don't have time for your team? It's a really interesting question. And I audit my calendar like I audit my wardrobe. I'm going to challenge everyone. There's ways for you to find time in your week. I'm not saying you need to meet with me 90 minutes a week, but if the month has gone by and you've never met with me, there's a real problem there. And so to really think about the number one job of a leader is to create more leaders. So are you making the time to coach, teach, train, spend time with them? And this is the biggest retention tool we have. And we've lost the plot on inclusion, because inclusion in the workplace is this: I work for you. I feel seen. I feel valued. I feel recognized. I know my voice matters. My contribution matters. You make time for me. I feel like I am here to reach my potential and the company's potential. And you know what? That's a big retention tool, because when I feel respected and valued, and I want everyone to think about this, go back to a time in your career when you felt that way. It is priceless. And so someone could come and offer me $10,000, $20,000 more. I wouldn't leave, maybe for $100K, but it's like that number. It's the knowing that I feel safe and welcome and that someone cares in my career and is invested in me. It's hard to put a price on that.
For leaders who are listening, are there some self-reflective questions they can ask themselves about whether or not they're making enough time for their people?
That's a great question. I would start by literally auditing your calendar. Now, some of you might be managing very large teams with direct reports. My question is, if I work for you, how much time are you giving me a month? And I'm saying, like, do you ever meet with me one-on-one? Now, here's the thing. Some people will say one-on-ones are useless. There's all sorts of things in the market, but the one-on-ones, you should never have one-on-ones. And I'm like, I'm arguing a one-on-one is a retention tool.
Yeah.
Think of it that way. If you can meet with me, depending on the size of your team, once every 2 weeks, once a month, check in, career goals. How do you think this project landed? Or just to do a 15-minute coffee so that people feel like, wow, this person cares that I work here. So there's that piece. If you are managing your own calendar or having someone else manage it, let them know that meeting with Mita is important to me. I know things come up, but I don't want this month to pass without spending 20 minutes with her. And don't do the keep rescheduling, and we don't meet till 2027. Like, no, right? And so think about that. And then I also want people to think about, this happened to me when I went from individual contributor to managing and leading teams, is like FOMO versus JOMO. I have to be in every single freaking meeting. It's like, why can't I just tell Brandon, I'm going to appoint him and teach him, tell him, you're going to be the lead for this meeting every Wednesday. I'm not going to it. Here are the updates you need to bring from our team. Here are the questions you need to be asking, right? So like, I just challenge people, you know what, if you get anything out of today's conversation, have the courage to cancel a meeting. Just freaking cancel the meeting. How many meetings have you been in where you're like bantering for 10 minutes and you're like, oh, Mita's on vacation. Oops. And she was supposed to be leading this meeting. Or this project was canceled weeks ago. Or we already talked about this in another meeting. Like, I promise you, you can find time in your calendars.
I know. It does seem like for many leaders, not having enough time is a very legitimate excuse. However, like, are they looking at their calendar with a very critical eye saying, do I actually need to be here? Are there tips or tricks that you've done over the years that has freed up your calendar in a way that's given you more time to spend with your people?
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you have the power, and this is all about power and dynamics, sometimes you won't. Meetings without agendas or objectives, done.
Yeah.
Right. We were just talking about our love and, following for Gary Vaynerchuk, who says, like, no hour meetings, it's like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, right? So that's really interesting. We've fallen into this trap of we need to meet for 30 minutes or an hour. So question, like, can the meeting be cut in half? Can this be done async? Is this a Slack or a text? Is this a voice memo, an audio message? Can I send someone else? And that's part of helping people grow, is that I'm going to let go of being here. I'm going to trust this person to do it. And I'm going to teach them why they need to be in this meeting. And so the key is, though, when you set these boundaries, I say, like, fend off and stay firm. Like, you've got to consistently do this. It's like going back to my wardrobe, right? You got to consistently look to see what stays and goes, because then there can be creep and things show back up again that you don't need to be in.
A couple of weeks ago, I released a podcast about what's in a name. And I know you had a horrible experience with one of your bosses about completely butchering your name on purpose. Tell that story if you can, and just your experience with names and your own name and just why it's so important.
So my full name is Mita Mallick. And for all the reasons you would suspect, it's been a source of embarrassment, joy, pride, shame, heritage. And I'm the proud daughter of Indian immigrant parents. And I graduated from business school and I thought to myself, I'm going to reclaim my full name, because for years I had gone by Mita for all the reasons you would suspect. And then I enter this team, and as I know you've seen in the book, I nickname all my bosses, and there's a reason for that. But this boss is nicknamed the Sheriff, and he was the bully everyone liked. He had like a network of deputies. He knew what was going on all the time. He actually was so tall, he could look into frosted glass conference rooms. When they're frosted, he could like look in. He wanted to know what was going everywhere. So I gave him the option to call me Mita. He didn't want to call me Mita. He didn't want to learn how to pronounce Mita. He decided to rename me Muhammad. And so it would be like, Muhammad, where are the sales samples? Muhammad, the agency's here. Muhammad, are you coming to lunch? This is happening. I'm a junior marketer, happening for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I tell you this story, and there's a lot of still shame for me involved in it. Like, I have a visceral reaction as I talk about it and as I was writing it. And I'll never forget, I had the courage at one point, I'm in his office. I remember exactly where I was sitting, his office, and I say to him, you can just call me Mita. And he says, "Oh, you're being so sensitive. Muhammad is just so funny. It's funny. It's just a joke." And years later, I really asked myself the question, like, where was everyone else that saw this
Mhm.
happening? Not so much my peers because they were junior. And let's be clear, retaliation is a thing in workplaces, it happens. But where were his peers? Where were his boss that allowed this behavior to happen? And we spend too much time at work not to care about what's happening and care about each other. And also, why names are so important is simply this: we all were named by someone who had big hopes and dreams for us. And so let's just honor each other by saying our names correctly, not nicknaming people. We started this conversation, and the first thing you said is like, "How do you pronounce your name?" I was like, "Is it Brendan? How do I say it?" Right? I'm not going to make up a nickname and call you Bran or something.
Yeah.
If that's, similar, like someone's like, if your name is James, I want to be James. I'm not Jim, right? If I'm Gabriella, I'm not Gabby. It was
Mhm.
so interesting, right? Even these small things that we do, it's like just ask people what
Yeah.
name they want to be called.
It matters. It's their identity. It's who they
Yes.
are. So we should respect that. And I'm curious if like that moment or other moments have taught you, and hopefully you've taught others about like just being open and wanting to learn more about other people and just the inclusive practices that we should be doing in the workplace.
Yeah.
What have you thought about that?
I think I'm much more aware about what's happening in my surroundings because of things I've experienced. Things that are, yes, of course, the things that are said, but the things that are unsaid. The coworker who's more quiet than they used to be, or sitting in the back, or their camera's off. You're like, what's happening with this person that suddenly the energy's changed? Can I check in? And it's not, I'm a big Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. It's not the stop and chat. It's like, no, I'm going to ask you how you're doing today, and I'm going to make the time to hear what's happening, because in some of those situations, and we know this, and your listeners know this as well, it's like all of a sudden then the high performer becomes the poor performer, disengaged, not meeting expectations, performance improvement plan out the door, versus what's happening to this person. Is their boss causing something? Something's happening for them personally. So for me, it's like just checking in on each other. I'm much more aware of that, because in those situations, like if I go back and it was someone else, it was you who had been renamed, I don't know if I would have had the courage to stand up for you in that moment. But what I would have done, and now I do, is to check in on that person, to say, I see this is happening. What can I do to help support you? And you're like, wow, someone else is noticing this is happening. And then if I can't interrupt in the moment, I can come up with the plan to help you. Is there documentation? Should we go to someone else? Should we go to another peer? Is there someone senior in the organization who can help us figure this out? Is it appropriate to go to HR? And so those are the things I think about now more, having had some of these experiences.
You described one of your bosses as the napper, which is just wild to me. This person would get away with showing up late, taking naps in the office, leaving early. Why do you think some bosses can get away with that behavior without being unchecked for so long before they're eventually let go?
Well, listen, I talk to my mom every day. She has the receipts. So let me tell you, when I was writing this chapter, she reminded me of things. She said, "Remember he did this and this?" And I was like, "Yeah." So this is a true story. And you know what? As people were reading the book and finding out, there are other stories of this, like the napping and other egregious things. You know what happens is, I think here's what I find so fascinating. I wish we had more courage in our workplaces to deal with these situations head on. So if I worked for you and I was constantly napping, showing up late, leaving early, for you to take me out to lunch or coffee or whatever and just say to me, "Here's what I'm seeing going on.
Yep.
Feelings aside, facts. I notice that you are coming in late. You're leaving early. You don't come to the team meetings anymore. I've noticed that you've dozed off." Okay, it's funny. Yeah, no, just dozed off, right? I've noticed you've been dozing off. Like, is there anything you want to share? How can I be helpful? And then to ask this question, which Michael Murphy of Harvard University asks, and I love this, I included in the book: what would it take to make you excited to work here again? That recommitment to the job. And either they're going to give you feedback and want your help, they're not going to say anything, or you're going to help them and you're going to come to the conclusion. Either they're going to come to it with you, or you're going to come to it on your own, to say that you're meant to do great things here. You're meant to do great things in your career, just not here. It's time for you to move on. And I wish more of us could
Mhm.
just nip that in the bud when we saw disengagement earlier.
I was just so curious why people have such a hard time having a direct conversation and giving feedback like that. What do
I
you think
don't
it
know.
is?
Yeah, I think part of it is it's that fear to confront it. No one wants to
Yeah.
have this uncomfortable conversation. But also, people make all kinds of excuses. You asked why people get away with it. You're very senior, you're untouchable. There's a layoff coming. We're going to get rid of Mita when we do the next round of riffs. So just let her stay and do what she's wanting to do. In most cases, they're the worst kept secret in the organization, certainly in the case of the napper. Sometimes it's lower level things, right? I mean, I was on in a discussion not too long ago where somebody was talking about they were so disengaged in their job, they were booking conference rooms and watching like episodes of Mad Men. You're like, what is going
Wow.
on, right? Not in hopefully a glass conference room, but it's like where you either recommit to your job and find a way to do that, or you move on to continue to do great things, just not here.
You wrote that HR policies alone can't solve for disengagement
Yes.
in leaders. So, if not policy, what do you think is a better solution as far as re-engaging folks?
Well, I think you have to hold leaders accountable. So if I'm working for you and I'm disengaged, you should be held accountable for my disengagement. Now, you shouldn't be held accountable for my behavior necessarily in that moment, but over time, meaning that like I'm my own person. You can't change me. But if you don't have the courage to have that conversation with me, you shouldn't be leading teams. Full stop. And the disengagement, as we know, it actually ties to productivity, loss of productivity, and it ties to retention. So those are all things that we can be looking at in terms of how are leaders leading their teams and what's happening with that team in terms of diagnosing how high is the disengagement or what can we be doing to turn it around. The point is, are you intervening or are you just going to let me continue napping at work all day, every day?
You said earlier one of the first mistakes you made as a leader, and I think this is all too common for contributor level people who are so good at their job they get promoted to a manager,
Yes.
to be a micromanager. How did
Mm,
you get out of that trap? Because it is tough early on. You did your work a certain way. Now you have an employee or two or three, and now you're dictating their work, and you're just so
yes.
hands on. How do you get out of that?
I had a team call me out on it once, and
Really?
it's beautiful when people can be a mirror for you. And, I always say with open ended questions, not you're micromanaging me. That's not going to be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking. But questions like, you changed the image in this slide. Can you explain why? I noticed that you changed the colors on this chart, like all micromanaging tendencies. And when someone says, can you explain why you changed the image? Yes, I'm a control freak. I like this image better. You're like, huh. And so for me, trial and error, which is awful because then we're experimenting on each other. But it's this idea that like you're very clear on what the output is. What are you trying to accomplish? And then some guidelines on the input. If you, like me, have worked at large public companies that love templates because you're presenting to the CEO, okay, there's a template to follow. That's fine. But if you have expectations on what you want it to look like, show the team examples. Show what a good proposal looks like. And this is sort of the rubric of what I want you to follow. It's like I remember being in college and you had like an outline for the thesis paper, right? Like help them with the outline, but then let them go write the paper
Mm-hmm.
and then tell them what you want the end result to be. And then
Mm-hmm.
this was one of my worst micromanaging tendencies is you would send me a client proposal and I would redline the whole thing and send it back to you. So imagine you spent hours on it, you get this document back and it's redlined. You're like, okay, I suck. Rather than saying, hey, can we get 15 minutes?
Yep.
I'm gonna just leave you a voice memo or I'm gonna just call you. I'm about to send you this document. I want you to know you did a really great job. And this is like a version one. I'm redlining these things that I know are important to the client. I know our CEO has mentioned. And so if I can give you some top line on what I did and send it to you, but even better, can I sit with you and say that and have you fix the mistakes? That's even better.
Yeah. I love what you said about like, what does done look like? I think that was one of the mistakes I made early on, was
Yes.
being too vague and then having to either redo the work or spend more time trying to work through why it wasn't what I wanted, because I didn't really
Yes.
define what that looked like. So I think if anything that people take away from this about micromanagement is like, show what done looks like,
I love
because
that.
then it's very clear.
Yes. Yes.
One of the things I've read and heard from a lot of people over the years is in our workplace cultures, we have this constant fire drill, or we want to wear busy like a badge of honor.
Yes.
I know managers play a really crucial role in modeling the behavior in our culture about being busy and urgency and all that. What are some tips to prevent a culture from becoming constantly urgent?
If everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. Yeah. That's it. That is it. Full stop. So sitting with your team weekly, once every 2 weeks, once a month, however your cadence is, to go through what are the things that are urgent versus important. Urgent means if this doesn't get done by 5 p.m. today, we're going to lose this client. We're going to miss shipping this product. What does it mean? What are the business consequences? And I wish people thought about that more clearly. The busy culture, I'm going to be honest, I think sometimes people don't know what to do. So they just try to be busy. They're creating meetings they don't need. They don't know actually what to do. So they're creating meetings to congregate people to discuss what to do, all these sort of things. And so the more we can focus on the outputs, that's what's going to be so important. And I think what leaders don't realize is that it's really damaging their brand. Because I talk about in the Devil Emails at Midnight, the boss who I worked for, the White Rabbit, which is a throwback to Alice in Wonderland, if you grew up with that childhood story. And because everything was urgent in a fire drill, there's a moment where I share where we really needed to get something done and no one showed up. She kept crying wolf. And so you actually desensitize your team. So when you really need them, hey, this happens. There are times when we're going to work on the weekends or we're going to work late. There are drive periods. Now, if you're constantly driving like that, that's another problem. But there are drive periods. We need this by Monday. How are you going to get the team to rally if every time you say this is due by 5 p.m.? People will start checking out. Mm-hmm. They can't handle that level of constantly being, like in fire drill mode. Because what does a fire drill mean, right? When a fire drill goes out, when the fire alarm goes out, get the bleep out of the building.
Right.
It is go mode. It is like there is a fire. And have you ever lived, I remember living in a New York City apartment building where the fire alarm was like dysfunctioning. Yeah. And then you start to get desensitized because it's going off all the time. It's annoying, but it becomes background as, oh, sorry, false alarm. Oh, sorry, false alarm. What happens when it's a real fire
exactly
drill?
You're in deep doo-doo.
Yes, deep doo-doo.
You said, this is a funny one to me, but you said beware the boss who's incredibly kind. So what shortcomings have you experienced with the overly kind leader? Because, I like to think that I would want to work for a kind leader.
Well, I would say it's the boss who is incredibly kind and completely incompetent. Okay, so that's the boss, right? Yep. So let's be clear. Because I think when people think, oh, you're too kind, we don't have time for this kindness in the workplace, doo-doo, whatever. It's like, well, no, I can be kind and firm. I can be kind and drive results. What does Brene Brown say? Kind is clear. But kind and incompetent is really dangerous. And so the grinner who I worked for always had a smile. I mean, was the nicest person. He knew the names of my kids, would send a pizza on a Friday night, like all the things you want from a boss, but he didn't know how to do his job. And so we propped him up like a puppet for too long. And so that's exhausting too. And there's a difference between like imposter syndrome, right? Like I've had moments where, I don't know if I should apply for that job. And everyone's like, that's your job. And then it's like, actually, I can't apply to be a machine learning engineer because I don't know anything about being a machine learning engineer, right? And so sometimes in our workplaces, we continue to push people and they fail up and they just don't actually know how to do the job. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's because the pressure to keep valuing people and you keep promoting them because that's the way our workplaces have been structured. Also, we're really good friends and you like me, so you're going to keep promoting me, all kinds of reasons. Or it's like, oh, that's the team's job. They're going to rally around. But I'm talking about a boss who couldn't prepare presentations, didn't know how to come up with speaking points, didn't know how to do, like in one case, basic calculations. You're like, wow, that is bad boss behavior. That is an unexpected one that can really impact the morale of a team.
Do you think leaders like the grinner actually do any self-reflection about whether they're fit to lead or not?
I don't know if they do. I think they're just so happy to have the job, right? And they also think they can kill people with kindness. Maybe, But we don't do ourselves any favors when we keep promoting them either. And so that's the question as well.
Is being overly kind the same as toxic positivity? Like, are there
Oh, that's really
differences? Yeah.
interesting. That is really interesting. Like, well, the toxic positive boss actually, in my case, knew enough about business. The
Okay.
grinner knew nothing, right? It was like the level. There's like
Yeah.
actually some level of competence to think about how you weaponize positivity in the workplace, right? And
Yeah.
in this case, there was a cereal innovation we were launching. I'll never forget. People were eating cereal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't recommend that. It's doing
No.
gangbusters. And this boss, the cheerleader, oh my God, he was the corporate Pied Piper. I loved being everyone loved being around him. He was super smart, super competent, coached people, thanked them, recognized them. You're like, what's the problem, Mita? Well, when this innovation comes out as doing gangbusters, or supply chain tells us we can't produce the product anymore, we're missing a key ingredient. This happens often in hard goods. And you're like, oh my God, all of our customers are going to be so mad. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to miss the forecast. This, boss, the cheerleader, rallies the team and adds $1 million to the forecast. We can do it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Go, go, go. And you're
Yeah.
like, we can do it. We don't have the ingredient. And then what happens? Fast forward to my performance review. No merit increase, not enough bonus to cover my Starbucks addiction. And it's like, oh, you missed the $1 million forecast, so you got a low rating. You're like, you're the one who added that in there.
You're delusional.
Yes, but that's the difference, I think. They're
Yeah.
they're close cousins, but subtle differences. Yeah.
Gossip is the worst, and especially with those bosses who are unable to keep secrets and confidentiality and are talking about people behind their back. Like, what kind of harm does that do in an organization, especially when you're at a leadership level and nobody can trust you?
Gossip will exist as long as humans exist, right? Gossip exists. It is the weaponizing of information. It's the harmful, hurtful gossip, particularly when it comes to from the boss who can't shut up and keep their mouth shut. I see this happen often in layoffs. Right before a layoff, when the worst kept secret, and there's a boss who's like, I think this team's going to go and that team's going to go. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why are you even sharing these details? It can have really massive consequences on just not a team's morale, but like people's careers and livelihoods and how you weaponize that. And here's the thing, I'll make you the gossiping boss. If you gossip about someone to me, I know you're gossiping about me to other people, right? And so that's the interesting thing. That happens in our personal relationships as well. But to really nip it in the bud and to just don't get drawn into the gossiping, just to say, thanks for bringing that up. I actually don't know. You'd have to ask Mita. Or I wasn't in the meeting, or I'm not in a position to answer that. I actually wanted to go back to this forecast I wanted you to take a look at, right? And to try to redirect, but not to engage in it.
How has our traditional idea of loyalty in the workplace warped into something that might be unhealthy? And what do you think like true healthy loyalty between a boss and a team actually looks like?
I think loyalty is dead in our workplaces. I think the loyalty that you think about, I had an uncle who left AT&T once, and I remember he got like a gold Rolex after 30 years of service or something ridiculous like that. Like, it's just like this idea of the social contract between employer and employee, where I work for you and you are going to give me benefits and a pension and job security. That's all been upended. And in exchange, I would give you unwavering loyalty. The average person is hunting how much? Hopping like, 12 plus times in their career. They're moving, not by choice sometimes, according to studies. And so this idea that like you expect my loyalty at all costs, and my boss, Tony Soprano, Tony named after the famous fictional mobster, expected that. It was like, he was in charge of my career. You go when I say you go, after I had completed a 1-year assignment, which was our commitment. He lost his mind when he found out I was networking in the organization. He's like, you're here for 3-4 years. I'm like, excuse me, that wasn't what we talked about. And so when you love people, you let them go onto what they're meant to do next. We have too many people talent hoarding in organizations because, you're useful to me. So even though it's time for you to move on, I'm not going to let you move on, because I'm actually smart enough to know, like, you shine, I shine. So I want you to stay on my team. But what's going to happen is you're going to leave eventually. And so I think that is being renegotiated and reconstructed and reimagined, like what loyalty looks like. I think we can only be loyal to each other in this moment in time, right? Because nobody can guarantee job security anymore.
Right. How do you think AI and other advancing technologies and even communication tools are changing the way people lead these days. And do you think it's creating more bad bosses?
Hmm. Well, I hope that, my hope is that as you get to automate and scale and all the benefits that AI is bringing us and will continue to bring, doesn't that have more time for us to meet with each other and coach and train? Like, I'm not an AI agent, surprise, I'm human. So I'm going to lead into being more human and the
Yeah.
things that I can do well as a human. And I hope it doesn't generate like create a generation of lazy bosses by
Yeah.
using like AI, but you're like, actually, all the things we're talking about, you can actually have time to start to do really well. And so that I think is the question. That's what we're going to have to see in the next few years, how that shapes up.
Yeah, I do wonder because these tools are meant to free up time so we can
Yes.
focus on doing the human things and the most important things. But I've seen people use it as a crutch and they
Yes.
lack critical thinking. And
Mm.
when I see an email that looks like it's AI generated that should have a human tone to it, like I'm
Yes.
kind of looking at it with one eye, like, is that?
That's not how usually Mita talks to me.
Yeah, right.
It's not usually her tone of voice. Yeah.
So in this
Absolutely.
conversation, we focus so much on bad bosses and what they shouldn't be doing. As we wrap up this conversation, like, are there some self-reflections or exercises that we can offer the bad bosses that might be listening to
Mm.
this podcast?
Yeah.
Or if we know of bad bosses in our organization, maybe we give them the tools to make the shifts into a good boss.
Yeah. I think three things I want to leave people with is one, most of us know when we've behaved badly, not the people who've made headlines, who've wreaked havoc on their organizations, who don't need an executive coach, they need therapy. The most of us, right? And so I'd love to invite everyone to do an exercise. Maybe it's once a week on a Friday. You pull out a notebook for 10 minutes and just write down some career reflections. It's career journaling. Most of us know, like, I don't think that conversation went well. I was too direct. That person was emotional. Something happened. They got red in the face. Like all these, you're like, let me go back and think about these things. It's really hard to sit in the silence and actually self reflect and admit we've done something wrong. The second is, I would say, look for the signs. If you're walking into a room, people are more quiet than usual, they seem disengaged, you're the last person to know about things in the business, people don't want to talk to you. Like, what's going on there? Like, think about that. The signs are there. Exit interviews, listen, I hope they're not canceled. I think there's a way to do exit interviews really well and look at those tools for companies. Like, I think that's important. And then number three, I would say, invite people to give you coaching. I had a boss once who would say to me, Mita, tell me what you think I should be doing differently. And I'll never forget the first time he asked me that. Thought I was kind and clear. He lost his mind. He's like, that's not true. That's not what happened. So what happened? The next time he asked me, I said, everything's fine. I wasn't going to fall for that again. And so stop asking open-ended questions. Do something like this. I might say, Brendan, in an email, I would say, hey, looking forward to coffee on Friday. I'm excited to talk about the project. I also wanted to let you know I've been reflecting on my career. Here's some things I'm working on, including how to delegate projects faster to the team in the beginning. I would love to get your coaching on this. See you Friday. And here's what I've done. One, you work for me. I put it in writing so you have time to process it. Two, I've been vulnerable. I'm not asking you an open-ended question. I'm telling you something I want to work on. So I've done some work. And then three, I use the word coaching. And that can be helpful in an environment where feedback can feel really heavy. And so when I meet with you, you might say, actually, Mita, there's something else I think you should be working on. I don't think it's that. And I'd say, thank you for telling me that. I'm going to take some time to process it. I'm going to come back to you. And I hope we can do that more for each other.
Mita, your book is awesome. You're such a good storyteller, great storyteller, actually. You're real, you're funny in the book too. It's called The Devil Emails at Midnight, What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. It's out September 30th by the time this episode releases. Anything else you want to point people to?
Yeah, I would love for you to go check out the book. Please order it when you listen to this episode. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your independent local bookstore. I love meeting people, so find me on LinkedIn, and then you can also find me at mitamallick.com. Thanks for this great conversation.
Thanks for coming on, Mita. Appreciate you. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.